We've started the recording, and I think we'll put into this public workshop. I'd just like to apologise for the fact that I need to be out just before 4. I guess Shell might need to. We've got that call on the fuel update. If you're going to join, that's scheduled for 4 o'clock. So we'll get an update from the government on the fuel things.
I need to be there.
Oh, maybe it's just mentioned that a week there. I'll let you know.
Let me know how it is.
Yeah. Anyway, so if I do need to leave just before 4, but hopefully we'll be done by then. Good afternoon, Councillor Copeland. Have we got another chair? Or
There's one there.
There's one there.
Yeah, there we go. You get a camera focus on the scene in bulb patch. There we go. Right. So, first item on our workshop agenda is to discuss the Lynch block future outcomes. I'm going to pass straight over to staff. Thank you.
Right, I'll just give a quick intro and then I'll hand over to the team. So this item is coming for discussion today off the back of a request I think that you made as part of the induction. We had a session with the Queenstown Lakes Community Housing Trust, and they raised the affordable housing potential of the site, and so you had requested that we look into that essentially. So this is the first of a series of discussions with you about that. So for those of you who may have been around for a while, there previously has been significant amount of work done on what are the future potential options for the site as part of the Lakeview development. So Paul's going to give some background on the Lakeview development and how this fitted into that, and that work will be leveraged for the purposes of this work. Carrie and Roger are going to give a bit of an overview in terms of the affordable housing background and the commercial potential of the site. But what we're really wanting to focus on today is talking about the process that we can go through to do an analysis, to identify potential options for the site, and then to go through an analysis process with you about how to determine which of those options you want to take forward. So today's session, as well as giving some background to the site and talking about the process, is going to be should be mostly about talking about what you want us to consider in terms of what outcomes you want for the site as we frame up the criteria and therefore the options for your consideration. So there'll be a series of discussions then about those criteria and about the options. This is really just to get really initial input into what are the things that are important to you for the site, so they can be a focus as we frame up the criteria and the options. Noting that there has been previous work done that will be leveraged, but part of this is testing that we want to make sure that you might have some additional outcomes, different focus, different criteria you want us to consider this time. So we just wanted to start with that view. Now I know you're going to want to get into what are the options, and if you raise things about well, we want to see this kind of option considered, we'll take note of that, but I'll probably just try and pull the conversation back a little bit, because really what we want to focus on today is not the specific options you want to see, but what outcomes you want to see from what outcomes you want to see us assess, and that you want to discuss and assess in terms of what we should be looking at out of the site. So unless anyone's got any questions on that, I'll hand over to the team to run through the material. Nope. Excellent. So Carrie will start off.
Yeah, so I'm just going to start off with some process aspects before getting into context. This policy cycle shouldn't be new to a lot of you guys. It's how we assess a lot of the issues that come across our desks, flagging that right now we're in that top right-hand corner. We're looking today to identify what is the question that we're looking to solve. And as Penny's alluded, and how we like to talk about it, is what does good look like? Because we as staff need that guidance to go away and develop that long list of options, which is then going into that right-hand side. And you can see that within that, it's quite an iterative process where we need to test things and come back and make sure that we've got it right. I'm not going to belabor the point on the other 3 aspects, because they're they're a little bit more of when the rubber hits the road. We will obviously, after we've developed the list of long list of options, be honing in on that and doing a deep dive. Council will make a formal decision. And throughout this, we'll also be considering what type of engagement may be indicated for the community. And that will hinge really largely on what options the council wants to see. So also wanting to explore different opportunities and ways of doing that. Yeah, we love to talk about monitoring and evaluation, but for us, that's really the whole point here is that we need to be able to do that to see whether or not we've achieved the policy objectives and the outcomes that we outlined today. So I've sort of spoken to this one as well, but this is trying to put a bit of flesh around this particular issue. I anticipate that the next time we come to the council, we'll be in a position to provide a little bit more findings associated with each, but right now we're really at that initial exploratory phase. At the bottom, we've signposted, but this could end up being more workshops. That what we would do after this is come back to you with a long list. You guys would discuss those, and then we go through detail as I alluded. See if I've got any other notes associated with before I hand it over to Paul. Just emphasizing what Penny said, it's just that there has been quite a bit of work done on this. So as opposed to if we were facing this issue afresh for the first time, we may be in a position to provide you with options to make decisions on faster than if it was something that we have in place later. So yeah, with that, I will hand it over to Paul to give a bit of context on the actual subject.
Right. 5 minutes on, I guess, the background of this. I'll cover off where the lynch block sits, the planning context, and some considerations based on the background for its future use. Location. The lynch block sits as a 1 hectare block of the 10 hectare Lakeview site. It's located in the northwestern corner. Actually, it's somewhat geographically separated because it sits up on an elevated block. That's which was part of the rationale for how we could set it aside back in 2018, which is quite helpful. And the Lakeview site itself is actually 10 hectares. It's split evenly 50-50 with reserve and council on Crown-owned reserve land administered by us, and 5 hectares of freehold investment property, including the lynch block. Probably at this point, understanding that there are current tenants on the site is probably worth acknowledging. Any future discussion can be unsettling around where they live. Roger will be able to explain a bit more detail about that. But the lynch block, as we've gone through the various development stages of this land, from what it was back in 2013 up until now, it served a very helpful purpose, and that we haven't had to evict anyone off the site. At one stage, we had up to 350 residents up there. So there's been a natural attrition, which is quite helpful in that purpose. So, and that was part of some of the work we worked with the council on last time. Just stepping sort of right back on why Lakeview, why this part. Really, the council has been trying to do something with this land since 2002. 1998 actually was the first sort of look at it, and the context for that has been obviously, I'm allowed to say that, obviously, growth at that point. So look, Queenstown was expanding outwards by greenfield development at the time, and there were some issues around that. There was an increased recognition that the land was scarce and underutilised in CBD. So, and some concerns around the PC50 response, I guess, was about some growth inward or some intensification. And I don't need to go through too much around that. We rezoned the 10 hectare Lakeview site, but there was also a further 5 hectares of private land adjacent to the site that really formed a contiguous town centre zone from the core up through some private land and then into the Lakeview zone. All in all, we extended the town centre by 15 hectares. That enabled more permissive height and setback rules. Development capacity increased on average across those 15 hectares 5 times. And on some of the lots, it could take it 10 to 12 times the development capacity in terms of floor area. And integral to this was this concept around mixed-use development, supporting activity and livability. The idea, I don't know, well, I'm sure you guys are across the advantages of having an active streetscape and the benefits that comes from not just having a residential development where you can go and grab the groceries or go to a bike shop or something like that. Paris apparently has quite a few bakeries. I haven't been to Paris, but within 3 minutes you'd go and get a croissant.
The third bullet point down is concern that the need for additional hotel and visitor capacity to sustain tourism growth.
Yeah,
Which that's in our district plan. Yeah.
yeah, and economic development strategy at that time, 2015, 2016, identified that. Camping demand was a straight line, and hotels was the other side.
Question around, does that need review? But that's for another day.
Yeah, so the economic rationale again is around this concept of a competitive land and property market. Back then, the CBD had 40,000 square metres of commercial retail space in 2002 or something. 15 years later, it still had the same. So there hadn't been, there was tightly held property, and there wasn't a lot of investment happening in that property. And in and around the CBD, you had a lot of single dwelling family homes, and you didn't have much more than that. So what this zoning allowed for was high density, a different type of product, but also the concept of bringing in other developers or other property owners who would be prepared to invest in the CBD, because like flats, for example, there was 4 times that consented, and I think a lot of that's starting to go through, so I won't have to go through that. The acknowledgement, of course, though, is that individual outcomes may not always align with personal preferences. So, that some people are quite comfortable in their single dwelling home up Main Street, for example, and don't like the idea that they might lose views and the like. But I guess the social license there is, someone said this the other day, urban designer, the views and the sunshine aren't lost, they're not going anywhere, they just move around. So i.e. they might go to the top floor, but in the meantime the bottom floor has something potentially more affordable that someone can afford and live in. So that's the high level sort of side of things around that. The delivery realities, as we'll get into, you need a developer of some sorts to actually do it. So you can have all the planning rules in place, and you can deliver the infrastructure and find the available land. You actually need someone to build something, and that requires a certain level of market understanding what the needs of firms and families or households is, access to capital and the ability to build what households and firms need. And in that, you've got obviously open market developers, but someone like the Affordable Housing Trust and the Community Housing Trust, they have specific housing products for defined groups, but nonetheless, they still are someone who will develop the site. So the critical factor here, I guess, going forward, and this is what we'll work through, is that there needs to be a clear outcome from council in terms of what we're wanting, because certainty will enable finance, design, construction decisions going on along the line there. So if it's quite clear around what we're wanting on the site, everything else will flow from that quite well because of that certainty. I've probably taken up my time. Happy to take any questions around that, but planning capacity already exists, and the question now is up to this process.
So essentially, we reserved this piece of land when we did the Lakeview development, and a decision was made that we would come back to look at different options for the site. And so that's the process going through now, but it's already zoned, it's already serviced by infrastructure. Yeah, Paul? Right. So, Roger, do you want to just give a bit of an overview about the...
So just to clarify, so it's fully serviced and able to be built on?
Not to the density yet. So
Right.
that will come with the resource consent and service it, but it's serviced to the boundary.
Right,
Yeah.
but not for 150 units, for example.
It's a single toilet super.
Yep.
Right.
It's a,
All the external
Yeah.
to the boundary
Yeah.
is serviced.
yes.
The infrastructure within the site and whatever happens.
Yeah, I understand that, but you've got connections.
Yes.
We wanted to put 150 units on there, for example, there's a connection there to
Yes.
bolt into.
Yes.
Yes.
Quentin had a question online. Quentin.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to explain a little bit more around the reasons it was set aside, because it's not, it's not like it's intentional. What's going on at the moment is intentional, but it was put aside because we didn't, we sort of wanted to see how Lakeview went. We thought that the best value for this land would probably be achieved after Lakeview was developed, because theoretically it should be high quality and actually improve the neighbourhood, so to speak. It didn't have while they're far from perfect, the buildings up there are not, they weren't as bad as the ones that were in the campground. And so that there was a going concern there that they could continue, a number of them anyway, could continue to be rented. And I know there's some variations on that, but it's at the moment it's doing exactly what we planned it to do, was to sit there and to bide its time until the timing was right. So it's not, just wanted to point that out. It's not sort of being lost or disappeared in the background. It's doing exactly what it's planned to do.
Yep.
Thank you. Nikki, you have a question?
Oh, yeah, it was a very specific one around asbestos risk. We
Ah.
looked at that thoroughly.
That's the next, I think Roger's going to talk to that.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
The cabins, we acknowledged earlier, there are some tenanted, they're not all tenanted, so just acknowledging there's people there. Quality wise, Quentin just said that we're better than the ones that, and probably we're holding by our fingernails to reach healthy home standards of the 13 that are there. That's why we're not investing in any more to bring them up to a healthy home standard, because it's quite a step up to get them to a healthy home standard.
And presumably why the balance at the 44 aren't currently tenanted. Yes, correct.
As Paul said, a 1 hectare site, there's not that many sites of that size as close to town, so it isn't quite a privileged position. I put restrictive access, that's more the fact there's just one access up Glasgow Street, so it's not like in Lakeview where you've got roads and there's access to individual super lots. It does have good views, but it is a slope side with steep contours. And asbestos, yes, we know there's asbestos within the buildings.
but in the ground.
Based on what we experienced at Lakeview, I'd say yes, there is.
Right.
I've got one caveat to that. on the old Lakeview site, there was an old campground, and my understanding is back in the day, well before 2000, when that campground was
Yeah.
demolished, it was just bulldozed and spread around the ground. I don't think, unless there was a dump up there for stuff. So that's only my take on it, based on what I know. But
We suspect there'll be some, but we don't know.
there'll be localised.
All right.
But predominantly it's in the structures that you see above. So in terms of as is, where is, what we talked about in terms of is removing the above ground infrastructure and then leaving the land as it's come to it currently, and however it's developed is undertaken by whoever would develop it.
Just to clarify the boundary of the idea. Per Stephen's comments, service relief, they have to be ripped up.
Oh, within,
Yes.
fine, yes, yes.
And around the boundary.
Well, there's services to the boundary, but it's the capacity of those services that would need to be analysed based on whatever gets developed on there, whether it's 50 sites or 250 sites.
But the 95% answer is they really got to be ripped up. Kind of.
Yes, within the site, yes, I would say.
So within the
Basically,
site, assume no
Yeah,
services, but it's serviced to the boundary,
Yeah.
like the rest of the Lakeview sites.
Service.
And that servicing was put in order to service those sites.
Yeah, there's 224C requirement.
Yeah.
For the subdivision.
Yeah.
Prior to us doing the Lakeview subdivision, I think there were 14 separate sites on that, and it was amalgamated to a super lot. And the engineering team or the infrastructure team did all the servicing as part of those upgrades.
So it's new servicing when the site was set up, but Roger's just saying you'd have to test, depending on how big the development there is, whether there was any upgrades required.
We did some work as part of the plan change on what the capacity of that site could be, and that fed into the infrastructure design. So as a base, I think something along that was an architectural plan up there, and I'm sure there was something like 10,000 square metres of floor area up there,
It's a heck of a
which is a, so
But it'll come
Matt,
back.
Matt got a question, and then the.
What's the current strategy for the tenants that, the 14 tenants currently? Is that a sinking lid?
Yep. Yes. That's,
And so you're not going to put any more investment into upgrading those?
no, it's 13 at the moment. It was higher than that, and over the years as people transition out with people just have a sinking lid policy. The 13 are the ones that we can, as I said, only just maintain at a healthy home standard. So once people leave, then that will be less than the number of occupied cabins.
Roger, can you go back to the map that shows the block?
That one? Or
No, next one.
that one?
Do we know the status that rectangular bit of land between the southern boundary, southern red line and the road? Who owns that and what's happening with that?
That's well smart.
Which is who?
There's a
second round developer, Jack Jolly, he owns that block.
He owns
He
that
also
block.
owns the corner on top of Man Street. He also owns the short other block between Man and there, and he's got another place in Frankton.
Right. Has he lodged plans? Has there any plans been lodged for that particular rectangle?
He's got resource consent for that, plus a lot, 2 lots, well, now 1 lot within the Lakeview site.
it's a
So it wraps around the corner.
hotel development.
We
On that specific rectangular site, there's a
Yeah.
hotel development.
Yep.
6 stories high, I think
Right.
about 24 metres.
Is that going to have a huge effect on the view from the Lynch block?
The
Or is it
lower
just slopes
levels,
up?
yes, but it slopes up enough that you get views as you go up. And the permissive rules that Paul talked about, the density you can get on there as we're going up in height.
Yeah.
Should negate any visual that might be affected from below. I think that's probably the points down the bottom is progress of surrounding developments will have an impact on what could possibly go on there or what is envisaged to go on there. But in terms of at a point in time, like I've put assess economic headwinds, well, at the moment it's probably a
Yeah.
no one would be in the economic turmoil we are at the moment. So things and market availability, I talked about the 1 hectare sites, there's not many of them available, but that's not to say more come on. So market conditions change over time. Just probably, as we know, values go up over time. It's just how much it will go up will depend a lot on the surrounding environment with the Singaporean developer and Lakeview as it gets built out as well.
And so the reason that this context is important is when we come back with options, obviously some of the options available are to dispose of the land and what we could then reinvest the disposal proceeds in. So this just understanding the nature of the site, but also the attractiveness of it as a commercial, as an opportunity.
And in the rest of timing, when is it going to be of the most value?
Yeah, that's my point. Market conditions fluctuate, demand and supply are key parameters, but obviously the economic climate at any point in time. As well.
And that was what Quentin was getting at earlier, is that it has been an explicit strategy to hold on to the site all the time that we have as it's increased in value.
Would we need to do remedial work on it before selling? If that was the option.
Removing the cabins is what we haven't priced up to get the cabins removed,
but is it an assumption that we probably would have to
I think
remove asbestos from if there's some in the ground?
Or it would affect the price.
you can also look at supply and demand and the market conditions at the time. If land is being sought after, someone might consider taking it as it is with the cabins sitting on there and deal with it themselves. It all depends on where you are in terms of that
Market value will be reflected of what you do and what you don't do, right?
Any inherent liability on the site will be factored into any pricing anyway, but as Roger points out, that fluctuates.
Yeah, and removing the cabins, how far do you dig? Sometimes it might be better to be someone else.
That's the 12.2 million. Do you agree with that number, higher or lower?
What talking to a valuer at a high level, we see it's around about 16 at the moment. So that's the what we have in our government valuation.
That's land value.
But then
Excluding demolition or
excluding demolition. Yeah. So you could be circa 15 and a half, 15, yeah, who knows? But that's just that's at this point in time, as I said, things can change. Those developments that we've talked about before will have a material effect on the value in itself. So time can be a great healer, but it also can be a curse depending on the market conditions at any point in time.
So a tricky question, how do you measure the social value if we do retain it?
Well,
You can say that.
segue into the next slide.
I just wanted to get it on first.
So tenancies,
Yeah.
are they fixed term? Are they month to month? Are they the current tenancy that 2013?
Residential tenancies,
So just periodic,
90 days.
so just periodic, no fixed terms.
90 days.
Yeah.
There is one cabin where there's a different interpretation on the lease, but we're working through that with our legal team at the moment, just to iron that out to each party's satisfaction.
With the majority of periodic.
Yes.
90 day notice.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So I don't think there's anything on here that's going to come as a surprise to anyone. We are a growth council. We also have an affordable housing issue, so this just provides that context. I guess new since this work was initially started in 2018 is the Dry Housing Action Plan, which this feeds into. Probably would go to the next slide, which is what Councillor Hall was referring to, is that Queenstown Lakes Housing Trust commissioned Benji Patterson to do a piece of work looking at social return of investment for specifically its secure housing program. That report's coming out quite soon. And it's very different. I mean, I think we're all aware that the options here that we're not going to talk about today, so go on a spectrum between, 100% affordable housing, 100% commercial, and they vacillate everywhere in between. So this is just presenting a balanced view of the information that we will then get into. So it's obviously a different study than looking at a pure commercial return on investment, and it's looking at what the returns are for the people, directly benefiting as well as the wider community. And it's the methodology for this study is a little bit more empirical than some that have been done in the past. So it'll be really useful to have to show actual dollar value. So at the minute, my recollection is it's showing for every dollar that's invested in the secure housing program, there's about $4 return for the community and district. But the report will elaborate on that in a lot of different respects and should be a key part of what feeds into that end of the spectrum of the discussion. So just saying that that's something that's coming up quite soon.
And that's really what will need to be balanced in making a decision about the site. How much do you and the community value the commercial return through a sales process, and what else we could invest that money in for the community versus the social outcomes that you would achieve, let's say at one end of the spectrum, and the social outcomes you could achieve through the provision of affordable housing at the other end, obviously. So what we wanted to talk about today was to just have a discussion about the things that you want considered, balanced, valued as we move through this process to help you make that decision. Obviously, it's not as binary as I just said because there's a spectrum, but that really is what your decision making is going to come down to for this site. It's where on that spectrum do we sit?
At the far end of the spectrum, is it looking at a 100-year potential investment opportunity for social infrastructure? So if you built housing like Simplicity Living do, they look at a 100-year investment portfolio. Would that be the far end of the other end of the spectrum?
That's so the $4 the Community Housing Trust have looked at, that's based on a 30-year average return that you might get based on a mortgage, typical mortgage. So that's the work that Benji's done in that area. I mean, the counterfactual is putting $18 million into debt repayment, and what's your return on that, which is effectively your weighted average cost of capital. And so that, but again,
or $18 million into a regional deal contribution to some other infrastructure project that we can't afford, that the government will then match in order to get some other outcome that we want. So there's a lot of other, even if we went for the disposal option, there's a lot of ways you can we could reinvest the money. So obviously in the past when we sell land it goes to pay off debt, but these options will traverse other things that we could do with that money that are more direct benefits rather than paying off debt.
I think probably the yield you could get in terms of numbers of houses on this versus the money invested somewhere else could be markedly different.
Yeah.
So you could get a higher yield in terms of return of affordable units versus it's
Depends what time frame you're looking at as well.
But I think this is the point where I'll just say that's the kind of thing we want to get into when we get into the options. So actually a model like Simplicity Living might be one of the options, and that is a different model than the Community Housing Trust.
So if you're
those are two different
I guess
options.
you're looking for a steer today of ideas, of options, that's one of them I would want to see. Simplicity market price.
Is that retained affordable housing?
It's not affordable. No, it's not affordable, but it's lower
It's
than
built to rent, so it's basically that it will be available on the rental market and not put into visitor housing. That's the key thing for us.
It's market rental.
But it is market
But
rental.
it's secured
More secure tenancy, yes.
I can give, if it's helpful, I can give some context around when this was the last workshop council in 2018. I think we had a market valuation of 10 million. And at that time, the Affordable Housing Trust was looking for zero consideration. So you had a continuum, 0 versus 10. The advice that we got around that was someone like a New Ground Capital or something like that might pay us 5 million for the land, but you still may get an affordable product. So going to what Penny was saying around the whole continuum, it's not one or the other necessarily. There's a long list, I think, we're looking at bringing back. From my personal perspective on this and just going through the whole plan change and looking at that sort of thing, it would be a shame to leave a 1 hectare site in its current form when we could intensify growth within the existing urban boundary versus going out further. But again, that's a discussion that we need to look at in terms of that. But to leave the site where council is effectively land banking would be a missed opportunity potentially.
That's an important point actually with the land banking, because that is what we're doing with this site. We just talked about that. But this is something we are trying to encourage other developers not to do.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Particularly when you're off the back of that. So the opportunity to have people, let's say people, and whether it's an affordable housing product or not, and sure as X, you're going to get some form of high density housing up there.
Yeah.
And I think benefits to the downtown and vibrancy and this concept of I think it's, I listened to this the other day, so excuse me if I stutter a little bit, but the idea around a property market that's dynamic and people can move, firms and people can move around with low transaction costs where there's less scarcity in the market, that adds to the vibrancy and the general well-being generally. So as a baseline, having that land sitting there with 12 tenants in it, arguably
I think there's
not the best sort of use of that.
There's another vector to keep in mind as well, is around the affordable housing component. The value of affordable housing, the return on investment is not the same in every single location. So, the value of affordable housing in the town centre versus the value of affordable housing out down Ladies Mile, further away from town, that is quite a different proposition, and that's hopefully some of the information that will come back through the work Benji's doing as well.
Well, Benji is looking at it more generically, but our intent is through the options analysis here to leverage what Benji's done and get them to do some more granular assessment for exactly things like that.
So generically, it's to the benefit of affordable housing rather than that site specific.
His report is not about the site, but that is something we can do as part of the option.
Sure.
We were talking about doing as part of the options analysis.
Good, because we need that for other things.
Can you take me through the payment process of one scenario, which is QLDC, bullet point number 4, working with the housing trust, developers, and other providers to increase the supply of perpetual affordable housing in Queenstown Town Centre. So let's say that we're totally to the housing trust, and this is probably a question for Stephen, who knows much more about this than probably anybody in the room. But I mean, where does the money come from? Who else joins the money? Then rents paid for it and paid back. Who's the beneficial owner of the land? Just under that scenario, how does the money move?
There's a range of options that could happen there, and they'll come back when we look at the options. So one of the options is to give the land to the community housing trust. They build on it using their money. They put it into the secure home, secure rental programs, which works in the way that they would have gone through with you, I think, in the induction, in terms of people pay rent, people pay to live there. One of the options is that we sell it to them, but at a lower rate. One of the options, well, I don't think it is an option to lease it to them. That's not a model they do, but there's lots of different ways that you could structure that. So we don't have a pathway now. What we're wanting to talk about today is to discuss with you what are the outcomes you want us to consider for that site, so that we can bring back a range of options that deliver on those different outcomes, and so that you can balance which ones deliver the best.
And multiple that we can assess against those
that we can assess, yeah.
So when we
Who are you trying to speak on?
I was just really into response to Q, because the housing trust, and we didn't want to get into options because these will all come back to us, but they wouldn't have been in a position to develop it all anyway. They would have had to go in partnership with someone else anyways. But this is all the next stage of those options. So.
Julie publicly stated that in the press release, right?
Well, it's not during our induction anyway.
Yeah.
Currently, I mean, who knows what could happen, but that was the current state.
So again, this might be way into the details more than we need to go right now. But if I'm a ratepayer, I like the housing trust, I want to go in the housing trust, but I don't want to pay through rates. You know, just trying to figure out.
It wouldn't be paying through rates. The only movement would be the land going to the trust at a zero or similar amount, then market value.
Subsidy QLCHT, the housing trust needs the asset on its balance sheet to be able to then go and borrow against it, or get money from the government through long-term loans, things like that, to be able to develop it, which is exactly what they did at Tiwa Banks at John Street in Narrowtown. Council gifted the land to them at $1, but because it's then on the housing trust balance sheet, they can then use that to be able to borrow against to build the buildings. And then with Job Street, what they've done at Job Street is they've got a combination of secure home, where they sell long-term leases, effectively recover the cost of the build, or they might do long-term rentals, or they might do rentals which have the government IRS subsidy to help pay the rent.
Does it
So the housing trust gets all the rent.
just in that scenario, it stays in perpetuity on housing trust balance sheet?
But don't, yeah.
The question you're asking, I think, is what it costs to the ratepayer is not getting the 16 to 18 million dollars.
The opportunity. Not,
It's an asset. We have to decide what to do with it.
Which is a very, if you wanted to spend $18 million directly on affordable housing, and given the maturity of the trust and where they've come to. So I've come to say, obviously, back in 2013, when we were talking to them, they were effectively mobilising, right? And it was quite, and back then they were struggling with long-term lease versus, you know, all this sort of stuff. And for that very reason, the council wanted to provide it on a lease, but there was some tension there because they needed the security so they could do it. Now, looking to where they've got to, I mean, you go through Arrowtown, whatever, you can see the product that they've got there, and it's very mature, and they've got delivery in behind them, so they're a very different beast now. And
a much stronger balance sheet.
Yeah, and my point is, if you wanted to provide an $18 million subsidy, let's call it, to the Affordable Housing Trust, it's a very efficient way of doing it because it's directly there. You know you're going to get that particular outcome, versus having to sell it and then get that and go through that whole process. And so it's quite, but it's specific. It's specific to a certain sector of the community, and it's specific to certain needs. So
I think this is the kind of detail we'll go through.
yes.
yeah, sorry, I've gone down the rabbit hole.
It's more of a process procurement kind of, not procurement. It's what's the word I'm looking for? But obviously when we did Lakeview, we went out for expressions of interest. We had our objectives and we went out to the market and said, you know, this is what we want roughly. Tell us what you can give us. Is it the same sort of scenario, given the value of the land? Do we need to go through a similar sort of process where we say we want retained, let's say, for example, we wanted retained affordable housing, even though we know the Housing Trust has a history and a record, which you know, when the various option bids were assessed, you know, that would come into play. But do we really need to go out and do an expression of interest process rather than tagging? And I don't know.
So that's a thing we'll discuss when we get to the options in the process. The options will be more generic than the community lakes, community housing trust. It'll be the nature of the outcome we want to get. And there might be options on there that we just decide to do that you might have to do a process like that for.
You may have to, you may choose to. We do have an agreement with the Housing Trust that would set a very good precedent, because we obviously done it to them over many years.
Just thinking of, you know, other companies, there is the possibility that they'll be set up to deliver an affordable.
Depends on going down the chips road, we're going with benefits. So we don't have any other active chips in the district at the moment. But developers, yes, simplicity, people that are offering different models.
So the simplicity type model, if that was the option you wanted to go for, you wouldn't go, we're going to go with simplicity. You'd have to go and do a market process.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there are potentially other players in the market. Yeah.
But I mean, with like that, we still do that decision tree.
Yeah.
Because we could just say, right now, we just need the money.
Yep.
Cash out 16 million, and that would just about cover the cost of that pipe they're putting down Robbins Road. I mean, that puts it in perspective. You know, that's all we would be able to do with that money, right?
Yeah.
It would cover the cost of that pipe. Should still But in terms of, what is the opportunity cost? Because we can just sell that, and a minute later, we'd never know we'd have that money.
Or we could leverage the 18 million for another 18 million and end up with 36 million.
But your weighted average cost of capital, we're better off borrowing the money and pay for the pipe. So, yeah, I don't think
And then the other thing that, of course, we've got to work out how to deal with this. There's never going to be a right time to do any of this. We all know the right time to do anything was 10 years ago, but there's going to be, well, the lake is going to be built for the next 20 years, and then the hotels in front are going to be built. We don't know when, we're not in control of that. So at what point do we decide that we need to do something, whatever that something is? Because not me, some of you might be having a discussion in 15 years' time, and that would
There's no.
I just wanted
the
to
options analysis,
counter
but
that.
there'll be a status quo option.
okay. So
I just wanted to counter that slightly. Is that yes, the best time to build something, to spend your money is in the past. The best, but people will always regret not holding on to a property longer than they did because they'll always, get more. So there are times at which, holding on to something is actually okay.
Yeah, and so that's what we want to traverse with these options. Do we want social value now? Do we want economic value now? Do we want economic value later? So I think what we do need to try and pull back to is, so maybe I'll hand this to Carrie in terms of what exactly how we want to frame what we want from
the discussion starter is when you look at the list here and on the subsequent slide, weighing in on, is that exhaustive? Is there gaps there? Are there ones that really resonate there for you? What's missing? And it goes to both of them because it can all be weighed quite differently. So we need your input on where these sit for you. And we know there won't be a unified voice, but it will help us to know what to look at closer.
And I guess what we don't need to, we can capture all of the potential outcomes now and later identify how you might want to weight them. Rather than thinking about that now, but what we do want to get a kind of steer from you on today is what are the things you really value in terms of considerations for the site so that we can ensure that we have options that are designed towards those.
And I mean, that's still acknowledging that what we will be presenting is a long list, that's a long spectrum. We're not looking to exclude anything at the minute. It's that now we need to know what is important for you.
And there is the option too of selling the land and then purchasing somewhere else. Affordable housing.
That's fine.
I mean, is that the right place?
Well, that comes back to yield. What you can get somewhere else.
But also social value. Also, if they are going to have a big block in front, is it going to be a concrete block in the shade? What's the best? Is it going to be affordable housing because it has to be heated as well? Affordable housing isn't just the value of the house or the rental, it's the cost of all the other things. So
I'm a little bit worried about selling it and then putting the money in the bank with a promise that we'll use the money down the road, because human behavior and turnovers of councils mean that very likely it just might be money in the bank and then all of a sudden it gets used for John's pipe. Instead of affordable housing.
But I think you can ring fence.
I'd like to express an opinion. I think it should go to the housing trust. They're well aligned. It defines, it also is symbolic, besides the fact that we're housing people who need the housing, especially people like teachers, firemen, policemen, public nurses, public servants. Not only are we doing that, we're also ratifying that we want to intensify in certain areas. We want to reduce the travel time. We're validating the CBD. I think symbolically, it's a very good one.
Can I put a pause? Because it's totally next stage. Right now, the staff want to know what the outcomes and success criteria. That is 100% going to be one of the options that comes to us.
I know, so that's exactly why I'm defining it.
There's some in there actually you pull out.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
So an outcome from that would be that you think it's really important that whatever option comes with future development of the site occurs, that it enables affordable housing
For key workers.
for key workers. Without saying how that's delivered, you're saying that that's a key outcome that any future development of the site should be designed towards. That doesn't preclude us from selling it. It just that would potentially cut out options of who we sell it to.
Yeah.
For example, if that was the most important criteria, which we've got that
Well, I
back.
think
But I'm just trying to think from what you're saying. So key outcome is key affordable housing.
For Melissa.
Yeah.
It's urban intensification.
Urban intensification.
That's one goal.
Yeah.
Another goal is walkability. Another goal is ratifying CBD.
Which is all inherent anyway as a baseline. I think the question is, well, yeah, maybe.
You could just be saying actually.
I just want to pick up on John's point about being clear around what it is you're actually asking for. So I don't think it's a fishing trip. We just do an EI, here's a block of land. Let's cast the rod out and see what comes back. I think we need to have a clear mandate and understand exactly what it is. And then within those parameters, you can then look on the developers, whether it be a certain sector of developers that can actually deliver on that. And just to your point, Nikki, on the EOI, it was just to remind you, it was a two-stage process. Yeah, so there was an EOI within, and then an RFP. And the RFP was quite clear. So things like the sort of profit mechanism was inbuilt into the RFP, so they bid on that basis. So what we got back was clearly defined and understood. The most important thing is when we do signal to the market, whatever the market is, they need to understand what they're buying.
So I think we agree that depending on the options that come out that are preferred, there may need to be a market process, but it would need to be focused. So for the purposes of the outcomes we want though, so the things I think that Q just raised are important, because although this land is zoned to enable those things, if we keep land banking it, we won't achieve it. So actually that's important. If this group thinks it is important to get an outcome from this decision that enables urban intensification, walkability, enlivening the CBD, that points to doing something with the land, not continuing to hold it. So if those are outcomes that we want as part of this, I think that is important to know, because Paul is right. The whole point of Plan Change 50 was to enable that.
And Quentin's trying to say something.
Okay.
Quentin.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to, I suppose, there's a couple of, I'm just conscious that when we set aside Lakeview, we had very high aspirations for non-financial objectives, and I'll read them to you because I think they're really valid, because I've heard a lot of them just now. These are the objectives that were set aside when we start at this point of the Lakeview project. Maximise financial return in a manner that minimises risk to the ratepayer. Establish a thriving residential focused mixed-use precinct that is stitched into the Queenstown Sound Centre context. Exhibits best practice urban design as walkable, activated, livable, authentic. Exhibits a consistent design language, high quality build outcomes that complement the natural environment, fit the Queenstown context, a human scale, diverse mix of retail, which complements and provides natural expansion of the existing town centre core and will appeal to locals and visitors. Provides intensification through the Plan Change 50 and delivers a variety of housing outcomes and a diverse residential community. Considers opportunities for visitor accommodation or visitor facilities that are economically viable, and ensure that the precinct's development potential is unlocked in a timely and efficient manner. I'm not going to comment too deeply on them, but what I would say is that I think we need to be really careful here that I don't think we've got a really good history of achieving non-financial outcomes on commercial projects. And, I think there's probably a more fundamental question we need to ask here is, are we focusing on financial objectives or non-financial objectives? Because I think yeah, potentially incompatible.
That's
So that is part of what,
question.
that's part of what we're asking.
It is the hard question. I agree with Quentin. I think it's much simpler to maximise the value out of a site like that. And then we can make a decision separately to invest for social, but trying to do it all in one is difficult. I just think with that site, there is some merit to the argument that we maximise the value of it. What we then do with the money, that's another question, and that could be partly to affordable housing. It could be partly to something else. We could be supporting the housing trust in one way. We could be supporting something else. I do think.
So that's one of the considerations. I think if we were talking about 50 or 100 million, it would be a really different conversation. I don't know if it was a million, it would be a different conversation. It's in that, price range where it has significant value, but what's it actually going to achieve if we didn't put that money in the bank, or if we sold that site and then wanted to fund something else, where what would the impact is all? I don't know, don't be a word for it, but you're actually losing the opportunity. You can sort of descaling what you can achieve by cashing out of one and then trying to do something else. And that's a decision that people will need to be comfortable with. The other thing that springs to mind is we're asking all our development community to put skin in the game in terms of inclusionary zoning. So, and I know we've given some land of our own in the past, but what are we doing going forward? So if we're asking government to make that compulsory, the fast track, or in the planning bill, what are we doing? Are we walking that one? And I'm just posing that rhetorical question because I think we would be asked that. I think we should be able to answer it.
I'm feeling like Paul wants to say that we should remember that we gave, part of the Lakeview agreement is that 5% is going to the housing trust.
Well, that was the concession. And Roger and I were talking about this before, and with Carrie, you might choose, instead of 5, you might go 25 or something like that. But again, that's probably part of the option. I'm getting ahead of myself again. It's an exciting problem to have. It's a wonderful plot of land, and going to Michelle's point, the opportunity to have that as and kind of doubling down on the investment that we've done in the CBD, and being able to sort of increase that. And it's not I don't think it's not trying to compete with what else is going on in the rest of the districts. It's just complementing some of the investment that's happening elsewhere.
Can I just throw in the question? One point the Quentin raised was talking about the visitor experience. Is there any sense around the room as to whether this plays a role in the visitor experience for you, or whether this is about residents, or whether this is about purely financial? But do you have a comment or a thought on its role in the visitation piece from an economic perspective?
Sell it for maximum value. If you want to sell it to someone wants to make a tourism thing out of it, then great,
I think
But are you? What?
this is not just
the value. How much value can we get out of this? I'm really concerned that we try and deliver affordable housing, and we're delivering it for a few people that skip to the top of the wait list.
I didn't
say skip. Sorry, I didn't mean skip. But a few people who are at the top of the wait list. There's a whole district full of people who need more affordable housing. And what we do when we put the rates up is, I just feel like, unless we're helping, what am I trying to say here? It comes down to the price that the housing trust or whoever does affordable housing can deliver that build for, because this is a different type of build. This is up, right? If you're going to maximise your yield, and that has its own complications. So then they, we'll have to partner with. So I guess we can sit here and theoretically say, oh, they could do this and we can have all this affordable housing, but I think we need to ground it in some reality around, is it achievable? And do we, again, go through this exercise of, we've got this great piece of land, we want to do this, we had great intentions, but it actually doesn't deliver for a number of very practical, real world reasons. Whereas if we sold it for the benefit of everybody for the maximum value, then we can decide whether we leverage it for another project that can deliver for everybody. It's just worth thinking about, because I think the goal of affordable housing is awesome. it's just a case we have to think of the practical realities of where, how, delivery, and who gets it.
So maybe your outcome there is deliverability. Whatever goes, it has to be viable and deliverable within a relatively short.
We're also not delivering emergency housing. We're not delivering for a certain sector of people with the housing trust thing. And so what sort of affordable housing? Who do we value? And is that being delivered on? Can we ensure it's delivered on? If we allow
a value call you want to make, or you want someone else to make.
Well, this is just it. But it's like, how do we determine who is worthy of that? There are people that are skipping based on the criteria. So, sorry, there's just so much to this.
There's a lot. Nicholas wanting to say skipping.
Got a bit of time.
Sorry.
Got another half.
Skipping just flipped out.
Nicholas trying to speak. Nicola.
I can't really speak because I've lost my voice, but I just on that Nikki, about helping everybody. I just don't know, is this a district-wide asset or just a Queenstown one? Like, e.g. that if we sold it and we got the money, would that go district-wide or just to Queenstown rate?
Well, it's a good question. We need to find out the answers to that.
I mean, at a high level, it speaks to what outcomes you want.
I don't know if
It's not pinned to anywhere in particular.
No.
The Lakeview Land Trust.
Not listed as a significant asset.
No, it's not significant. It's just investment property.
So just going back to
What was that answer? It's not anywhere.
There's no status on it, Nicola.
It's status as investment property.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, Melissa.
The up to this list, in terms of like outcomes and the success criteria that we're looking for, I don't actually think there's any bad ideas anyone's had today. Do you know what I mean? They're all good ideas. They're just on the spectrum, and I really focus in on the responsible stewardship of the high value land. I think that is what, to me, that's the outcome. Like, whether that looks like giving it all to housing trust or selling it or whatever it is, I think that that's where we have to do. So we actually have to not be give it all to the housing trust, sell it all. We have to all have a very open mind in getting the best outcome for our district or areas or whatever. That's my focus and takeaway from that.
So linking back to Nikki's comment, is an outcome, I think an outcome you're both interested in is that whatever we do with the site has a long-term benefit for residents.
100%.
As opposed to a short-term one-off impact, but it has a long-term and for the most number of people as possible.
That's my view.
But it might not be specific to the site.
No, it might not be specific to the site, but it's the most benefit to the most number of residents. I think something like that. But long-term benefit.
To do affordable housing, you've got to slow like this cost to get it the ground.
Well, so exactly. So I think that's what I would like to focus on, that we are being extremely responsible with this asset that we own and what we're going to do with it. That's what that looks like. I'm open, ears open. And I guess what I also want, and this goes a little bit to the fact that it's not a significant, I've forgotten what the word is.
It's not listed as
strategic asset, because then this goes to the success criteria in terms of the informing the transparent decision making, because did I read somewhere there we would consult on anything that we would do?
That's a decision that.
Oh, that's a decision because it's not a significant, because that's what I was like, maybe that was in there because it's significant, but now.
Depends on the decision. So we make that assessment at the time. At the moment, there's a whole lot of decisions. So when there's a specific decision, we can then work out
whether it is. Okay, I'm quite keen on whatever we do, that it is super transparent so the community can see. So whatever route we decide to go down, whether it's sell it all, whether it's give it all, that it's super duper clear in terms of the reason and the process that we're going.
Yeah. And I just to add to your point there, I think it's really important. This is why we've actually got Carrie holding the pen on the analysis, so that it's a really clean, neutral policy analysis, because there's been so much work done in the past from really great corners of the organisation. We've got to bring it all together. We've got to make sure it's really balanced and that what comes in front of you, you have the ability to make a really clean decision.
Okay, Quentin would like to speak. Quentin.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just wondering, just in terms of consistency, I mean, look, Lakeview was different because there was a whole bunch of stuff that was required to occur, you know, to do with reserve land and the, you know, the campground and all that sort of stuff. That made it a slightly unique proposition, but we've sold the Common Edge, we've sold Sker Heights, we've sold other pieces of land that are on paper equivalent to the Lynch block. Effectively, they're freehold council land. And we didn't, beyond making a decision to sell it and to setting a value to it, we didn't, you know, set aside any complicated objectives. You know, the point being, it was saying we maximise value. That was basically the bottom line: is we maximise value to the ratepayers. So I don't quite understand why this site, apart from its historic use, I don't understand why this site is particularly different to that.
So I mean,
freehold land that's available for us to, you know, to.
I don't think the site is necessarily different, Quentin. It's just we're trying to improve the way that we do this, so that there is a clearer decision-making path and a more transparent process around the factors that come into play. That's probably the long and short of it. This isn't a particularly complicated piece of work from a policy perspective, but we're just making sure that we're stepping through this in a really open, transparent fashion.
It's also because this has come in front of you because the Community Housing Trust raised it with you as wanting this particular piece of land
that there is a valid choice,
and it was always earmarked for that.
There is a valid choice for us to make whether, you know, we weigh off affordable housing opportunities versus economic return. And, you know, I think that's you know, I accept that's a valid choice, but I mean, I don't, I'm just.
So that's what we're here asking you. If you want us to only focus on maximising return, we can do that.
Quinn, but could I offer something?
I don't think we need to add the complexity of saying, I mean, it's a given that we are maximising return for the ratepayers and trying to get the best outcomes from that. Now, you know, those outcomes are either financial or they're something else. Now, as I said, I mean, that's a fairly binary choice. There is a bit of, I'm just concerned that if we get too complicated with this, like, you know, dare I say it, with Lakeview, we do water down the, you know, the economic return or the other returns. We either, I think it's fairly binary. We've got to be really clear on what the outcomes are, because I think they're in conflict with each other.
Well, so I think
if we use it for affordable housing, there's a massive opportunity cost around money that we would otherwise, you know, we just won't have access to, and equally, you know, but the other, if we liquidate it, so to speak, we turn it into money, we have a range of choices of what we can do with it and do it responsibly.
I think, Quentin, you're making a good point. They're only in conflict though if you go to the both ends of the spectrum. You could have something in the middle that is a blend of both.
But I think my point is, I think that's dangerous ground. I think the middle ground is really dangerous ground, because I think we haven't, you know, and as I said, I just don't think we've done a very good job of it at achieving any of those outcomes or many of those outcomes at Lakeview. You know, we haven't, you know, got.
There's an opportunity there. Maybe John and then Pete. Sorry.
Did you want to finish what you said?
Sure, if I could. Gwen, I agree that the cleanest way to do this is simply to sell the land. But we're not really in the financial markets for things, and I'm not even sure if we do it very well. But let me push back on just the raw value of the land. We already know that Benji could well be coming through with a payback, a multiple of 4 times. And that's kind of the business that we're in. The fact is we have an asset and we have a way to multiply that asset by making a social decision rather than an economic decision. And so for me, that's what argues in favor of seeking a solution that's outside of just the pure value of the land.
And there is the ability for the housing trust to leverage that over and over, and that's, could they, how far could that go? And I suppose we need to model that in the capacity, but again,
I actually think that's what BMG's analysis does. It's not just the benefit to the individuals who are in that particular rental,
it's how big it can get from the basis of.
And also, as an owner of the asset, we're in this unique position that nobody else is in, where we can have a social outcome. Nobody else is going to have a social outcome if they own land, unless they want to just donate it to the housing trust. But very few people do that. We are actually in the position to be able to do that and get a social multiple off of that.
The question is, if we sold it, gave them the money and they invested it somewhere else, could they leverage it?
That's a question. That's a question. There's a whole lot of questions here.
Yeah.
And we need, hopefully BG, trusting will be looking at more like a quadruple bottom line at cost benefit analysis. What are the benefits to the environment of having more social housing? Because there's very little affordable housing in this part of this map. And now, then you try and apply a rationale and say, well, if we use it for essential workers who are health workers and perhaps government agencies, particularly police and others, well, most of those agencies are going to have their headquarters at Frampton, so that doesn't really, so there's lots of questions here, but we need to do a cost benefit analysis. I think there's more to it than that, more along the lines of what Q was talking about and what Paul alluded to earlier. There's almost a social contract with this community that this council will contribute significantly to solving the affordable housing problem in Queenstown and the rest of the district. But I'm picking on Queenstown here because it's not well served. We have control here. We don't have control over what's happening at Lakeview. It's commercial development, and as Quentin just outlined, we're not meeting some of those objectives that the council anticipated we would achieve early on, but from a perspective. So, sorry. So there's an opportunity here for us to actually do something significant. We have, arguably, not very, the most effective community housing trust in the country wanting to do something with this land. We have a need to do something with this land. We have the ability to control that process and or strongly influence the housing market in Queenstown Lakes. I'd like to see us focus on those sort of things. How can we contribute, yes, maybe keep it in broad terms, to significantly contributing to solving or at least mitigating the housing affordability in the district. Now, however that comes out of this, I'm not wedded to. My preference is that at last the site actually be developed for what was intended 50 years ago for affordable housing. And the conversations I was involved in at the time, and looking at the cabin and the campground. So those, there's more to it than just the fundamental economics of it. And we can make a difference here. And then what the criteria are about how effectively we are achieving what those outcomes are.
Cody's wanting to speak and Pete. Cody?
Hi, thanks. I wanted to add something that hasn't been said because I think all the discussion's really well put and well raised. Basically, from my point of view, what have we learned from Lakeview that we would go, that didn't work so well, we should do it better this time? Because I appreciate Quentin's comments of, trying to do both and have it both ways often means that you don't do either very well. So, and this feels like the same position that people would have been 10 years ago when they were coming up with the maximum value of Lakeview. And there's a lot of sort of ambiguous reflections or sentiments around what the outcomes of that have been, but without really assessing that for what it is, it feels hard to move forward on this. If we were looking for economic value, did we achieve economic value or did we lose money? If we were looking for social outcomes, did we achieve social outcomes or did we not? And I think that assessment will help drive whether or not this is going to be best to, which fork of the road we go down. But my instinct tells me you know, a tendency to go towards economic value, to be honest, given where we're at. But that's my 2 cents.
Let's go. I'm glad I didn't go first because you made my point, basically. But no, I think what we did learn from Blakeview's comment is you can't want something but not keep the asset. You can't sell it and then still want something from it.
Yeah.
I think so. I think that's one of the big learnings from Lakeview potentially.
I think he's not finished yet.
And I still, I'm sorry, so it's only I believe in Lakeview that way, to be honest. But I think like talking about a long list of options here, I think we need a shorter list of options. I think it's either we keep it and let somebody do something with it in the social license space. We sell it and take the money and do something with the money, or we just keep it and continue land banking it. I think those are sort of the 3 channels we need to go down. If we look at the middle one, sort of to your point earlier, Nikki, like that affordable housing piece, if there's 156 units or something up there, that's very, very focused on who actually benefits directly from it. But the argument in that space is if you look at Job Street, yes, there's 76 units there, but what that development does for the community of Arrowtown and surrounds and having those people that can afford to be there, live there, play there, it actually does have a much bigger social construct than just benefiting those individual people.
And the businesses they work for, that's kind of what BG's.
The school role, like people like that.
Then always.
So John's point as well, like, it'll be full of hospital workers probably, because that's who we need for here. If we want to keep the vibrancy of the town, it won't necessarily be nurses, might be firemen. But yeah, so it does get very, very complex. But I think the longer our list is, the more complex this will be. And this can be as complicated as we want it to be. We can sit here for 3 years and do nothing because it's too complicated. Or we can, try to get some better direction.
Yeah.
3 options.
Well, I think all of the options we've talked about are variations on those options.
Yeah,
they're all variations of we keep it and do nothing. We sell it and here are some options of what we do with the sale proceeds, or we gift it in full or in part to somebody else who can achieve social benefits on our behalf. But each of those has some options.
We should be careful about assuming what somebody else is capable of doing with that land.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, they're all grown-up people and they'll either do stuff or they might go, oh, no way, not there. Can you just give us the money and we'll go somewhere else? I don't know, that's not what they've said. But I think, we need to, if we are going to get other people to do stuff with that land, we just need to take, that's your job.
But I think going back to Heath's point, I don't think we control that once we choose to sell it. And this is the point, one of the fears with Lakeview was that some rich billionaire would just buy it and build a mansion up there. And look, that problem exists. But I mean, I just don't want to underestimate the risk of us going down a managed pathway, because as soon as we choose to dismantle, to knock down the buildings, we have this massive unknown risk of how much asbestos, if any, or that we're going to come across. And at that point, we start down a pathway which is unstoppable. We have unmanaged risks that we just don't know. We don't know what the infrastructure costs will be if we choose to be part of any future development, including through the housing trust. We don't know what we possibly don't even know what the land stability issues are like, because we just barred. If you sell it as is, where is, you get value and someone else takes the risk. I suppose that the biggest learning I've had from over the last few years is taking on high risk, low control models is a dangerous path. And as soon as we touch it, we're on a high risk, low control model.
So one of your outcomes there then sounds like the level to, definitely got the low risk, the minimum risk on here, but also the level of management that is required ongoing. Because if you are selling it as is, whereas then that's released from us, it's over to somebody else. But same also with a housing trust, you sell it to them for $1 and off they go like they did it to the banks. So so you want a low touch, low management solution longer term.
I think so. I agree with that.
But it sounds like we want some kind of control over what the land is using it for.
So just for clarity, so if we give it
Question mark?
so if for some reason the trust winds up, like, if we give it to them, does it come back to council? If the trust ever winds up, will they stop doing what they do?
Yeah, it does.
So with Tiwa Banks and Job Street, what it has on the title for Tiwa Banks is a covenant. It says the land must always be used for affordable housing. And if a future owner of that lot were to, of Job Street, were to not do affordable housing, i.e. breach the covenant, council has the ability to step in and require the land back. So what it does is it puts the use of the land on the title for all of them, which reduces the value of it, of course, because the bank looks at that and says, well, we can't really sell it on the open market. Well, we can, but the use of it is limited. So it does affect bankability of it for balance sheets, but it can put that guardrail on there.
But it's not just passes back to council.
No. So that's in the idea that if the housing trust ever hit the wall, then another chip could potentially pick it up and continue to run it, continue to provide. So Job Street was all about what the council wanted that land to be used for, not necessarily by who it was. Just wanted to make sure that land was always used for affordable housing. And this is something we could think about for this lot is, sure, we could sell it and put that guardrail up to say whoever buys it has to use it for affordable housing, but that reduces the value of it. Right? So, which means they can't leverage it much, but there's still that. And what the Housing Trust found is that because of their really good relationship with their bankers and how strong they are now, the banks would lend against that for them. And we got through that process. So it still sits on the community balance sheet. That's the argument that the Housing Trust has, is that it moves from the council balance sheet to the Housing Trust balance sheet, but at the end of the day, the Housing Trust is a community asset, community.
So it stays as a community ownership.
Effectively.
Yeah.
Matt was trying to
a few years ago. I'm trying to get my head around PC50 and whether we need to still give effect to it at all, or whether we can completely ignore it. And the reason I say that is because that's what drove that mixed model of selling a piece of land but still wanting to manage it. Because, you know, in there it sort of stipulates that we want to create something out of a commercial zone of the land of the Queenstown Town Centre, which sort of says, well, if we sell this piece of land, we want you to build X, Y, Z here. So if we sell this piece of land, where does PC50 come into it in terms of us saying what you have to do with that land?
Under the zoning rules, the land has all the height and density setbacks of the town centre, but it has a residential overlay. So it's effectively a residential zone in terms of activity, but it has all the density and setback rules, etc., and intensification rules of the town centre.
But they're parameters, aren't they? You don't have to build.
You don't have to go as far as
you can do whatever you like.
You do whatever you
leave it as a blank section, right? So
you could.
Yeah, well, the Sultan could put his, I think Quinton was talking about before, you know, someone could just buy a ranch up there.
Yeah. So we have to accept the fact that if we sell that piece of land, we have no management control over it.
Depending on the, yeah, and what's not understood around the first objective of the Lakeview development, the council looked at before they went to the market, by the way, was, you know, manage risk within certain parameters or maximise profit within a certain parameters, and the parameters were quite well defined. So we were clear around what we were taking to the market, which was a development agreement under the current circumstances. So it wasn't just let's try and maximise profit and do a vanilla sale. It was do it under the relatively structured managed development agreement that we currently have.
Which is messy.
Yeah, so that'll have a price. And just one other thing on the risk there. We shouldn't be as naive as to think that because we think we can pass the risk on to the private sector in terms of asbestos or whatever like that, they will obviously bid back that risk in there. So it's like if it's $2 million worth of risk and it's 16, we'll get 14 for it. So don't think you're just passing on risk in the market or the commercial sector or
be naive about that.
We can test for that.
We probably just
Well,
need.
we can, no, we can
But
understand.
just don't, I mean, we need to understand that
But
it's
I
not,
think that's quick credits for markets and no invest then. You're not starting down a rabbit hole and suddenly digging and digging and digging and 2 million, end up 3 million.
well, they'll probably manage it, yeah. From a commercial standpoint, they'll think that investment is a 30-year investment, and they will probably make that 3 million back tenfold.
Yeah, you would hope.
And if they're commercially minded and they've got
That comes down to market conditions.
Correct.
Buying the supply and demand. Well, it's how they evaluate that cost or that risk.
And what they choose to put on the site because they have to make that back. That might change, you know, whether they put residential accommodation or visitor accommodation. Or this is residential, so they would be able to make it commercial, but.
Well, it's, you're allowed 10%. There's some, you know, yeah, again, that's
So
consenting.
all of those are things that I think can be traversed as we go into the options. So I think we've got quite a lot of information from you on that. I think it would be good if we wrote that up and sent it out via email, because what we'll do next is we'll take that and use that to frame up some options, and the next session will be more about those options. So I think it'd be good just to test what we've taken out of today with you, or not, but just to let you know what it is, so if you have any violent objections to it. And then the next workshop will be looking at the options. A long list. Not too long, of course. Well, we don't want to
Sorry,
take any
just
options
one
out
comment. The other
before,
problem, just one comment.
Hang
The
on,
other
hang on a
problem.
second, folks. Quentin's trying to speak. Yeah, Quentin.
Just one other comment is that, look, asbestos was one thing. It was an unknown risk, and we found more than we wanted, obviously. But the other mistake we made at Lakeview was underestimating the infrastructure costs, and I don't think that was unknown. It just was misscoped. So if there are any costs that we could incur, including, you know, consequential costs of infrastructure and stuff like that, I want some proper work done on them up front, not guesswork.
Given the conversation and the risk and audit committee meeting earlier, that's about doing some pre-mortem of learning from that experience, applying it to this, so we take the good things and learn from the things that so far have been lessons from Lakeview, so we get the best out of whatever this project becomes.
What could go wrong?
I have to leave.
Okay, yeah.
My day job will be back shortly if I can.
Cheers, John.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, well, good luck writing that one up.
Have you got a market valuation?
It's got to be drafted across it. And
Is it worth, can we see that? Market valuation? Is that a good idea? Just because it'll talk about the site characteristics and all sorts of bits and pieces other than just the value, right?
I think when we get to the options, that's a piece of evidence that will inform the option for sale, and I think it will be not draft in, and so I think we could share it, but I think there'll also be a commercial.
I'm just thinking because valuations often go through all of the actual on site, what's on site.
yeah, that's why
Detail and all that sort of
I
stuff.
want to go back to, because it's in draft, and we haven't costed up what would be needed to clear the site of that, which is important.
Yeah, that wasn't quite what I was thinking. It was more just that it would have the real detail on the site around some of those questions. That
But we could extract that detail out of the report and send it.
I think it's worth something to think about how much commercial information is going to get shared in that network next workshop.
I'm not, it wasn't the commercial information, the value of the number. It's the fact that I know that those property valuations have a whole lot of other information about the site, specific to the site, that might answer a lot of the questions that people have asked today, like what's happening around next week, what's happening, what's on the title, what's the blah, 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 what's the blah, blah, blah. You could almost just take the number out. And, you know,
The revenue that we're generating at the moment, the cost of actually upgrading it and keeping it as it is for a while, how much revenue we'd generate over the next decade if we just retained it as affordable housing for 40 units now and then sold later.
That's the status quo.
Well, the status quo is leaving it as is without any investment in the.
Oh, I see. Like actually.
So what if we just maintain them? I'm just, I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, I'm saying
it's not
because that's revenue generated by us using.
thanks, guys.
See ya.
Yeah. thought we were selling.
Bring the auctioneer in, bring the auctioneer in.
As you've seen last week. so-
Then we're gonna
Sell
sell
it.
it.
But then, okay.
And we do think it might do for people's homes.
Yeah.
I think
Got a 10-minute break. Let's get you.
Sorry, I've got a 10-minute break.
All right, good afternoon. I think this is our third workshop now on the Constitution, and we have just a few matters for today for direction. A couple of them are just really confirming that I've got the sentiment right in terms of wording, and then there is one for direction. So there's a total of 4 matters to be discussed. You might recall in last week's workshop, we talked about some advice in terms of the matters of significance, as significant and engagement policy. I think you have since received an email, some information from Simpson Grayson on that.
It's a mic sunlight.
Yes, so that's great, thank you. So the intent is that we bring a paper back with the Constitution or the draft Constitution for adoption. Target date is 25th of June. We have bottomed out a number of the key matters with just a few more to talk through today. And if I start working through those 1 to 3, the first matter was council role in preparing the water services strategy and the annual budget. So my records show that we kind of landed on this proposed wording. Council may provide feedback on the water services strategy and request amendments as appropriate. However, final approval of the strategy rests with the board. So I'm just testing that I got these words accurate.
request and require are 2 different things, and I think that was the difference. So requesting amendments doesn't give us any power, it just leaves us at the point where we provide comment. If we wanted to sit where we sit with the airport at the moment, we would have to require amendments as
I
appropriate.
think the legal advice gave you some reasons not to use.
I know we did, but we still talked about this last time, and my recollection was that we thought to start with, this is where we would sit with a greater level of control and I think
With request.
with
Required.
require. We can require amendments, we can require the same thing of Queenstown Airport, and it doesn't. I don't know, I mean, in terms of the dangerous.
I thought we got to request. not
Yeah, I
require.
did actually go back and listen to the recording because we went around a few times.
Wasn't my mind, but
And the final position was request.
it might have been mine. I think we should be able to, at the start, request, require changes as we can with the airport. I think we're giving away too much power at the start. And having interviewed the potential candidates, they were all at a spot where they were quite happy for us to have some control. And I'm not as worried as some potentially about the STEAM director idea. To me, this one would be sitting that middle ground of, it's unlikely we'd have to consult. I agree with you. Proving that water services strategy is too far. There's no point in going down this route. But there may be things that they're doing. This incentivizes them to work with us and collaborate. And I think that was the intent of everybody that we interviewed anyway. But
Okay, should I just get a little bit of feedback from
others? Yeah.
Are you there, Mike?
Yes, loud and clear, if everyone can hear me.
Yeah.
Look, I understand Nikki's point around having, if require is included, that does create, I guess, a slightly bigger stick with which to wield. But again, this is not really an issue for legal advice. It preserves the power to require. I think the terminology that was landed on last week was as appropriate as well, which indicates that the council's got some discretion to exercise around whether or not it requests or requires amendments. So I'm not really sure this is an area where I can provide too much in the way of meaningful legal advice, I have to say.
Yeah, I don't know, I'll die in a ditch over that one. I'm just
I
saying.
wasn't part of the previous meeting because it overlapped with another meeting. I would be in favor of request or require or just require. I think at this stage we need a little more control and we can always surrender that later.
So, I mean, just so if we swap out request to require, why would we want to be require amendments if we're then saying final approval rests with the board? It's a contradiction.
You're right, it is a contradiction.
It is a
and I
contradiction.
probably we should just leave it at, you know, the board is, yes, it's approved by the board, but we can require amendments. That's what we would do with the airport. They approve it, but we can
Well,
require
that's for their SOI.
Yeah, that's the
Well, we're not talking about
No,
SOI, we're talking about all of the.
but it's effectively, they haven't.
I think if you're requiring the units, potentially you're deemed as approving the strategy, because if you're required to make a change, you're insisting that a change occurs.
I think it would depend in law probably on the quantum of the change, would it not? Like, depending how significant, if your change is a wholesale review of the water services strategy, fine. But if you wanted to make a change which was, no, we actually need to do Luggett rather than Kingston or something, you know, because that aligns with what we're doing, or, you know, no, you have to, you know, build this. If it's a small part, I don't think we would strike a problem. But if it was a large part, we would. Well, we could take advice on that at the time, but this preserves our ability to do that. Otherwise, we're giving it away.
Okay, Mike, wanting to speak, Mike.
Yeah, look, I'm just coming back to the advice that we circulated on PX or on a withheld basis prior to the last meeting. I think it's the only distinction really between the two is that a request is a softer one, and the board may engage with you and say, I don't think that amendment needs to be made. Require is a firmer direction, but the practical implication is that if the amendment that the council wants to require the board to make isn't agreeable or isn't agreed to by the board, then you need to have some process built around that to allow that issue to be worked through so that the board can in fact approve the final version of the WSS.
So have we got somewhere in the constitution about how we deal with disputes? Because that's what
we will need it.
That's where maybe this could sit. I mean, apart from sacking the directors, which we would obviously want to do, having spent a lot of money to recruit them. So, because I think it's at the end of the day, the organisation is there; they're going to have the legal requirements placed on them. And what say we get, putting it the other way, and we're assuming that the organisation's not doing what they do, but let's say the councillors are asking the organisation to do something they shouldn't be doing. So what's their safeguard, and how do we resolve those differences? And that's, well, I mean, but if we've got in there that we can require amendments, then we could put the board in a really difficult position, because we could be requiring them to do something that they firmly believe is the wrong thing to do. So, and that's so. How do we talk about that? You know, how do we build a structure into the constitution that enables a way? You know, it's a process. How do we deal with that? And we'll have the same with actually how we develop the service structure, how we feed into that strategy. You know, what's that process? So, what sits in the constitution? What sits outside? Keith.
So, just a question: if we were as a group, as a council, to request amendments, opposed to requiring. So if there was an amendment wanted, but the council as a whole didn't agree, would we need to bring that to a council meeting to then make a decision to bring a required amendment to the water services strategy if there was disagreement between councillors?
Yeah, a decision of the council, wouldn't it? The comment, I imagine that
service strategy could take years.
Yeah, well, that is potential. So the process, your normal governance process would remain the same. So you resolve to make decisions that would remain the same. But it could result in the situation where the strategy is not approved essentially by council, if you want to alter that wording. Mike, do you want to feed into that? Because you did have your hand up.
I might have forgotten to take it down. Look, I think in either case, you would be sensible to have a dispute resolution provision in your constitution, because even if the council was to make a request that the board did not like or did not want to agree to, then there could be a space for good faith discussions between the board and the council on that particular point to avoid any tension arising. And as I heard someone say, you're going through the recruitment process now, you don't want this to get off to such a rocky start that the board decides to up and leave. But equally, the ability to require an amendment should have that dispute process built around it as well, so that if the board is uncomfortable with that amendment, there was a way to work that through as well. So my view is you'd want that in both cases, depending on how you land on the wording.
Are you happy for me to take that away as a direction that we will see a clause in the draft constitution which will deal with matters that need
Where
resolving?
are we going to land, do you think, for the paper on request versus require, or will that come back to us for further discussion?
Oh, well, I think based on what Mike's suggesting, you could leave request in there or require, and then if the CCO don't like what you're asking, you can then trigger
sit down and
that resolution clause or dispute resolution clause in the constitution. I think that's what Mike said.
I prefer request as well. I think require is way too strong a word.
I don't.
That's your opinion.
Yeah, it is, absolutely.
You've said your best strategy. Let's the other
I think that's not, I think that's.
What's that?
If you want that to be required, then I don't think final approval of the water service strategy needs to sit with the board, needs to sit with council.
I agree with that.
I don't think that's appropriate.
But I think under the legislation, doesn't the final approval of the WSS have the rest of the board, because it's the board or the company's strategy at the end of the day. It's not the shareholders.
Well,
it's the companies.
Take your word for that. What it is. And in that case, then I'm even more staunchly for request than required.
So I'd like some clarification.
Sorry,
because
the legislation specifically gives you the ability to choose. That's why
That's why it's being discussed, yeah.
Okay, so my difficulty is with the second half of this sentence. In the process of interviewing the chair candidates, what came through and what really caught, I think, everybody's imagination was that the people who we found the best were the ones who wanted to collaborate with council, and that it was an iterative process back and forth, and that we would agree communally on the strategy, sort of like we agree here. However, the last half of the sentence says final approval of the WSS rests with the board. I'm uncomfortable with that. I think that it ought to be some sort of a process where council is involved in that as well. So therefore, that would define what you brought up, which is require, and that we have final overview.
Isn't it collaboration part? Maybe as council get to request amendments.
Yeah.
And the board ultimately decides.
What does the Act say, Penny, about the options? I think because it says there's 3 options, doesn't it? It says we can approve it, we can.
You can remove amendments, I think. Might should go with amendment.
Should we go into public excluded, and then we can talk about talk through his advice that he shared last week?
Sure.
Okay, yeah, having done so, we'll just pause. Just stop the John's.
And it was in regards to the audit being a different mechanism or different request or requirement as opposed to a review. So the audit being, the only one that can appoint the auditors is through the OAG. So we can maybe reframe that a little bit. And the review and nominated party. So we would have to run through our procurement process to get to that nominated party rather than, I don't think council can direct us who is to undertake the review because it would contradict our internal procurement procedures. So we would run the process and bring that back, and you would make the decision through the evaluation on who might review it, who might provide the review.
There's 2 parts to that. The audit, the council definitely can't appoint because it is the auditor of the CCO.
Yeah.
The second part is, can the council appoint a nominated party for review? They need to be looked at separately.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, they can.
What we're saying is we probably need to have a scope, brought to council, and then a procurement process based off that scope. So instead of nominating is probably you, party is procured by council.
Yes.
So we could procure direct, or would you saying we would have officers would need to do that? Because I think there's a few things that we need to be able to procure as a.
No different to the way that we procured recruitment for the directors.
Yeah.
We'd bring it back to you with the procurement plan, and
We sign the procurement
you would
plan.
sign off on.
The evaluation would be undertaken and you would make the final decision.
Yeah.
So we would change the word nominated to procured.
What engage?
Although, well, yeah.
Engage.
The premises, obviously, we need to just follow our internal procedures.
We just need to really get really clear about which is council, that this is council, not QLDC. Is that what?
No, this is council.
Yeah.
So is everyone comfortable?
So that applies to the audit part of that though? The audit part is separate, right? The board has to appoint an auditor.
Are we talking about just the water services
We
strategy?
can request and that be done, but the board would have to appoint the auditor under the OAG's guidelines.
Oh, is that right?
Is that different? Yeah,
The board appoints its own auditor.
just like where you appoint.
No,
Well, it's under the guidance of the OAG.
So is this a audit review of the water services strategy, not a financial?
No, it's strategy.
So sorry, the audit we have over our equivalent of the water services strategy is a financial audit. That's the audit, kind of type of audit this is talking about. That's why it's governed by the OAG. Question mark?
No, so currently an LTP gets audited, right? So it's a forward-facing document. So it's like a prospectus. So that's the equivalent of the water side as a water services strategy. So at the moment, they're not required to be audited. Only LTPs are required to be audited. But if we decide that we want it to be audited, we do need to give the Auditor General a year's notice, and we do need to leave it up to the Auditor General to decide who that auditor is.
So the League says the water services strategy doesn't have to be audited, like the LTP has to be audited, but you can put in the constitution a requirement for the water services strategy to be audited in the same way that the LTP is. That's what it's about.
So let's just, sorry.
No, you're right.
If we just go back to the key decisions document, because this is quite specific around what we're trying to achieve here.
Sorry, so many things going on. They go out of
the full financial forecast.
Yes, it's exactly the same. The water services strategy is exactly the same content as the LTP and the infrastructure strategy with a small amount of extra content.
So would the auditor of that be engaged by the board rather than by the council? We can request it, but then the engagement would be the council. They would be notified.
We request.
Yeah, they would be engaged by.
The board would engage them, I would have thought, Mike can confirm that. What we can do is require them to do that.
Right.
There's rules around engaging auditors and it's governed by the OAG for this sector.
Can I ask a question about this? By putting it in this, that means they have to do it every year, or can we have a clause saying that we can?
I think
since we made request may require an audit. So we have that again, we have the option.
Oh yeah, so we don't have to, because all I think is a huge cost.
So this was this is the specific item here. So the council could decide to include a requirement in the constitution for the entity to have its strategy audited or independently reviewed, either by default or upon request.
Now, is there any option to be involved in the scope of that audit? Is there any, because there may be certain things, I mean, what would be the value, what would be the value of it if you don't really get the things looked at that you looked at? I know.
So, I was just going to comment on that because I heard a question earlier about the distinction between a review or an audit. I think it's important to note that if there is an audit, it's going to be on the same basis as the long-term plan is audited. So it will be focused on a report product, which will comment on whether the water service strategy gives effect to the purpose of a water service strategy, which is the same framing that's used in the Local Government Act for the LTP.
Which
and
includes
it'll
whether
be,
it delivers on the statement of expectations.
yes, and it'll comment on the quality of the information and assumptions underlying the forecast information in the document, but must not comment on the merits of the policy content of the strategy. So it is that true audit approach. Yeah. Whereas last time at our session, there was a comment around a broader review that the council might like to commission. And if that review is separate or distinct from an audit, then it might allow someone to be engaged to comment on whether the policy direction or the strategic direction is appropriate.
Thanks for the refresher.
Interesting, looking at what the OAG said in their submission to the select committee and what the legislation was that local authorities should require water entities to carry out an audit or to request an audit. Because that makes them accountable to the public, and just having them requested means they're not accountable.
Good for water rates though.
Yeah,
cost.
That's right.
Not.
Well, our modelling would include an audit because it's based on our costs.
Yeah. So, yeah, you.
So, right. Any direction you'd like to give? I just think the wording might be, but you said this is indicative wording, just the general intent. So, yeah.
I think it's important though that the point of this is whether you want to require the CCO to undertake an audit. Reserving the right to do it, you've always got the right to request that. The point of clarifying it in the Constitution is so the board knows well in advance that every time they do this, the water services strategy, they're going to need to get an audit done, as opposed to just waiting till 12 months out, which is the minimum requirement, and ad hoc every time making a decision to ask them to do that or not. For the audit, a review is different because you can ask for a review at any time of anything. You don't have to give the OAG 12 months notice. You don't have to, you can appoint, engage a reviewer. It can be focused on anything. It can be broad, it can be narrow.
But with the audit, I mean, we don't have to, I mean, we may choose that date may go past and, you know,
it's the day.
We don't have to sit down and make a decision and have council do a paper and make a decision. But if we feel we need to, it's there. And I think that's
the discussion last time was that you'd like to have something in there as a holding pattern in case you wanted to pull that lever, but not necessarily as a recurring.
Not a recurring.
Yeah.
It's the May.
Yeah.
So I'm worried about the worst case. We have a sewage failure, and immediately, what document do we go to if we haven't requested something, if we haven't required something, and we have no audit to go back to, because it was recurring on a regular annual basis. We can immediately go back to the audit. We can immediately point to the audit. That to me is, you know, it's sort of DEFCON 4. What's the downside? The downside is sewage failure.
Well, it's not.
No.
Yeah. Given the conversation again that happened in the Water and Risk Committee, that best practice would be that a review be done very quickly after the immediate problem.
But that takes costs.
Sure, but therefore, aren't we relying on these people being supposedly experts? So therefore, we might want to look at them ahead of time, but we can only approve the strategy, not the operational plan.
So we can do, and remember, use economic regulation. That is going to be looking at the water services strategy and their strategic asset management plan, their asset management plans, their investment plan, they're crawling all over everything.
So the matter that we discussed last week, which I think was to your point, councillor, was there's the financial stuff, but what about the effectiveness of the strategy? And that's where you had kind of said, well, let's think about a review as well. And if we want to pull that lever, we will, knowing that there are two different.
So that's the KPIs, the effectiveness of delivery of the strategy.
Pardon?
That would be like CE KPIs, the immediate delivery of the strategy.
When we put this into when we write it into the Constitution, and we put the sections of the Act that apply next to everything, so it may require an audit under section blah blah or review it. It will just save any complications around what anything means because you can go straight back to the Act. Right? Thanks.
I just think we put it in the Constitution and we have the ability to require an audit or an independent review, and whether we decide to do them down the track is up to us. I think it's okay. The easiest answer there.
Mike, can you just confirm, does the legislation give the council that power to request it at any time? This is in there because you also have the option to put it in the constitution to require them to have an audit. Is that right, Mike?
So there's, I mean, I must admit, no, I quite like the framing that we just heard mentioned there, which is reserving the ability to require an audit to be undertaken, because your other option here is to include it in the statement of expectations, and that is something that the company will have to give effect to, and that is, I mean, let's talk about this. If the Constitution reserves that ability, you may decide to include that requirement in the statement of expectations, in which case the company, as part of preparing, will need to make sure that there is an audit report for the water service strategy. But because it's in your statement of expectations, it can then be dropped out if for some reason you decide that it doesn't need to be done on a full WSS basis.
So you're well covered, you'll have it in constitution, and then if you decide this particular period, we want either or both, you can put it in. Yep.
Okay.
4.3.
Okay, number 3.
You're loving it, Maz.
Thanks, John. Yes, so I just wanted to do a check. Again, I went back to the recording and I spoke to me Glover about this to make sure that I had the sentiment right. And this was around, did we have a kind of decision-making forum? And it felt that the consensus in terms of direction was we might do, but we don't have to make that decision now. Business as usual in terms of the full council. And if you decide that's appropriate later, we can deal with that later.
Yeah.
Good.
So only thing. Wait. So, and this is parachuting into the next item,
yes,
which is about the role of Mana Whenua. So, do we put in the constitution that selection panels for board directors will include Mana Whenua representation? Because that's my understanding of quite a strong expectation.
So can I close this one down here?
I only mentioned it now because it's talking about how we select directors. Is there a committee or something? So this isn't a council committee, but there's a process around selecting directors that involve Mana Whenua representation.
We'd have a set
Are you specific around that? Oh, because this was kind of like the intent of this was forum for a lot of different things that you might want this forum to make calls on your behalf.
Yep.
So we could say if you're happy to park this, and
park that.
That's fine. And then you might want something specific to maybe.
I was just thinking about the policy we have on directors for the airport. Like we have a separate policy for councils of where the decision maker, it's not a separate panel.
Okay, cool.
Have a policy.
Okay.
So I didn't mind that means to generate little looks at the end of the table, but because I mean, do you want to talk to the next item? Because I'm not sure we spoke about Mana Whenua involvement, different options and things right at the start of all of this, and then we didn't go anywhere. And I'm not sure what's happened in the meantime. I've just I can give the context. I spoke to Sam Broughton today, who's been engaged by Te Kuratata Ini to do some of this work and work with the different water services CCOs. This was just for me to try and understand what is happening, what is the Ngāi Tahu expectation. So you'll have had a chat with Sam and probably Edward, so I'd be quite interested in hearing what
so a bit of context to come in behind. So Sam Broughton has been brought in by Te Kuratata Ini, which is Ngāi Tahu's freshwater water sort of advisory service. This role has been brought in to help to be focused on Runaka, to advise the 18 Runaka on sort of a collective approach. As you can imagine, within the Ngāi Tahu Takiwā, there are 21 TAs and 5 regional councils, and various ones are going together, and some are going by themselves, and some aren't doing. So I hope what was picked up with, between the minutes of quarter that was going on, the need for consistency and approach across the takiwara is very important to them. And so Sam is establishing that with the various different rūnaka. So Sam had made some suggestions about the sort of things that he's advising some of the rūnaka to position, where to position themselves, or if water CCOs were coming and asking for input. But he also acknowledged that he hadn't yet formally started that engagement. So we've heard that from Te Kura Takapini, is what I'm saying. We haven't heard that from Edward and the rest of the 7 leaders at the moment. So it's really helpful to hear that from Sam, because we sort of know where they could be shooting. But what we need to do, and where rūnaka are coming together at the moment, is to basically line up what they're going to agree with from the advice, how they're going to approach it and whatnot. And just keep in mind, within those 21 TAs and 5 regional councils, we're the furthest away. And we're not just the furthest away, we're not just the furthest away, they're actually really far apart as far as the individual 7 themselves. So their ability to coordinate is quite tough. So hence the reason why the slightly longer leave into somewhere like Selwyn, for instance, who only have to deal with one rūnaka, and it's half an hour down the road. So we're really pushing and being a little bit noisy in that space around rūnaka to sit there and say, what are we expecting? What am I taking back to council, so on and so forth. But it is, yeah, it's, and obviously we've got other conversations going on as well about different matters. So fortunately, I'm not able to give you a really clear indication about what their expectations are, but we do have an indication from Te Kura Takapini about that they would definitely like some form of representation. Where that sits is between the negotiation between the rūnaka and the individual CCOs. So yeah, I mean, cheekily he said to me, 5 cents on the board, please. You know, but you know, he said I've got no authority to ask for that. But you know, that's the sort of approach that they're going to try and push for some form of involvement. Acknowledging also that we are within our establishment phase. We're trying to, you know, meet our requirements and help us out. So yeah, the next couple of months are going to be really, really interesting.
Right. So it feels like we've advanced a little bit since then, doesn't it? Me and Greg are getting a conversation with
Sam. Yeah, well, I mean, I just had a conversation to try and understand what the expectations were of Naitapu, and I was told the expectations were that, you know, the constitution should cover values and ways of working with mana whenua, that mana whenua would be part of the selection panel for board chairs and board members, and that they participate in that board selection, they participate in the water strategy design, and that there should be sort of formalised mana relationships between board chair and board and not necessarily the Okaha Tami sort of structure, but within the Rūnaka. So that was the very abbreviated version. I'm very okay. Well, we had our long listing and short listing and board chair interviews, so we didn't make that one. What do we do for you know, how do we have an involvement when we select the rest of the board? Or is that something that we actually, you know, build into the constitution, that once any future selection of directors will involve, you know, do we have statements about involvement with mana whenua in the development of the water services strategy? So
I think the equally pressing thing to the board there is the first statement you made, which is the values being in the constitution. That's not a small thing. And so I wasn't here when this was done, but I was here not long after when we went through that exercise for the spatial plan. So there are values in the spatial plan. If those are the values that Ngāi Tahu has already agreed, if all the rūnaka agree with, that kind of we could flow through into the water services CCO, then that's not a big task. But to go through a process with rūnaka to agree the values that we put into the constitution about partnership with rūnaka is that's quite an exercise. one where we don't yet have an engagement model. So that's what Arne's working on at the moment in terms of how we engage with Runaka. So we don't have that easy.
So to put that placeholder expectation of what's to come in the
constitution.
Commitment. To do all of these things. I don't know whether that needs a time frame on it, but it might do. But there might need to be a decent time frame to give time for that process to go through. It sounds like a couple of years, possibly even.
Oh, I mean, need be that we're not going to unwind that you've already had or the selection panel. There is an opportunity when we shortlist and select and interview directors for the rest of the board.
You could add them into the process.
Given that and also given that we're not due to confirm the board chair until the 7th of May, and on the 9th or the 10th of May we're due to be having interviews. So there is a little window to parachute somebody in. It was how would you really quickly have a management conversation between someone like Edward and whoever gets that board chair role, so I don't know. I'm trying to see if I can organise a conversation.
Did Sam identify a mechanism for identifying how they would come to us with like a person who could participate in that process, or because I don't think you've had any of those.
So what Sam said is to cover Pini, this has just come through this afternoon, is keen to support your connection partnership with to Renanga so that your CTO success. Perhaps the first meeting with yourself, your new chair, once confirmed, and Gabrielle Huria, who's the CE of that organisation. The chair would be good in the first instance, maybe the day after the council meeting, and to see if we could lock something around that. So that's just get through.
So that sounds like it's after so you've got the chair in place, and then
the next day
we'll be involved as quickly as we can with the remaining 4 director appointments.
But that will be after the constitution. Yeah. So their first point about wanting the values embedded in the constitution will have to be something we come back to.
We ask them to word a placeholder or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think
because we don't. The constitution kind of needs to be in place to be able to go to the full board, right?
And it may need to be an enabling constitution. And I think the one thing that we heard from all of the candidates that we interviewed for the board chair was that this isn't something that just happens here. You list, you like it, what we are, which options you want. It starts, over a period of years, with relationship building, and we're having to try and navigate a changing relationship space where we've had a transactional space to organisations. Now there's clearly expressed desire for a different type of relationship. So that's sort of
that's how
can I just check something there? Because Penny, I'm not sure we're on the same page. So the constitution, which is the key milestone next, my view is we won't have time to do all of the work justice around the value.
Yeah, correct.
So we have a placeholder.
Yeah,
both organisations, okay, will partner to get that.
But we could check with them that the placeholder
is appropriate.
I'm just trying to match because we don't have time to do that process justice. Yeah, good.
So I just
but we shouldn't dismiss it and say we won't people do it.
No.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add another piece of the conversation, which was the conversation I had with Edward a couple of weeks ago, in and around the acknowledgement of the difficulty that we face as QLDC, and that they have isolation and connection issues within themselves, and to come in here, but he did reiterate that they are resolved to work with us and to work with the water CCO. They understand that it's going to be a different mechanism for, say, Otako dealing with DCC, right? That's an easy relationship for them. They have to get a little bit uncomfortable in our relationship. So he acknowledged and he wanted to pass that on. But I did express with Sam and with Edward that we are sort of within our process already. The consolation was, well, at least you've got to think a lot of people. And so the consolation is they were actually very, very happy with the conversation that was undertaken at the mana-to-mana. They might not have liked where the vote went at the end, but they were actually pretty resolved to go, well, no, it doesn't mean that the conversation is over. So he was actually pretty upbeat, which is what was giving me a little bit of energy around it. I think some of the direct advice that Sam gave to John, that he didn't give to me, potentially I don't have that job type, right? that position of mana, so it's helpful to hear that. But yeah, he was quite cheeky with me, whereas he's able to John. With me, he was actually very direct. We're not here to help councils. He said, we'll help them as Bruno can direct us to help them. But their purpose is to advise the Bruno. But yeah, I'm trying to bring that conversation with Edward forward as a sort of a placeholder for now. I do want to make it clear that the transactional operational relationship with Te Amarama and Ōkaha still continues. The different level of engagement that they're looking is because a mana to mana has been established. So, within a very raw thing, we've kind of got our relationship with Tene and Ōkaha's offices of Runaka. Runaka tell them what to do, we work with them. You guys are building your own relationship. And it's a visionary relationship, as you sat down and talked about. Very relational, not really committing to promising anything. You're just sort of promising to continue to hear out the table. So I don't know, I have no idea as far as what is legal and what is able, but I'm trying to hold space for Emmy as much as I can, and I'll take whatever you can give me to take back to them to say, we're storing it on, but we've got this put aside just in case.
I think it's important to note through this period while we're wanting to work with Sam and with Runaka about the CCO at the same time as we're going to be going back to Runaka to be continuing conversations about the Shotover wastewater treatment plant disposal options. So we're going to have to, those are going to have to come together because keeping them separate will be weird. To be frank, because they're they're both water, and the Shotover disposal situation is going to become the water services CCO's implementation problem. Well, not problem, responsibility, and we're going to have to bring the board into both of those discussions because from a mana-to-mana perspective and a decision-making perspective, the board once they're on board has a role. So there's a lot of complexity for us to try and navigate, which is why I'm trying to, what we're trying to work up an approach to so that we can do all of those things.
Good thing because we are trying to set the CCO up for success.
Yeah.
But the good thing about it is that the convenient thing of the 3-year election cycle is that we've got very used to changing elections and having different people on the other side of the table. So they're ready for it. They're ready to have our continuing relationship with council and go grumble someone else about it. That's their conversation to have, and we'll still continue that as well. But it is going to become one of those ones where I'm going to have to try and, I don't know whether I take 2 hats to a conversation and go, since the CCO, let's have a conversation. Cool, okay, this one, let's have a conversation. We are going to have to make it quite obvious.
Because this isn't the only thing we're talking to Runaka about. We've got a session on Monday with the joint committee for the regional deal about the regional deal. So, and that won't be a services CCO thing. So we're trying to do all of that together.
So it just about has to be enabled in the Constitution. It can't, because the Act is quite clear. The Act says that the water services entity must provide for, in its significance and engagement policy, how it will relate to iwi. And if the statement of expectations also has to say so. Now, it might not say very much, but the Constitution can't get in the way of those things. It has to enable those things to happen. So, that what you outlined, John, it sounds, I think that's right. So let's go with that because that's pretty clear.
Can I just clarify something? Do we want to have additional directors or advisors to cater for this? So on top of your 5, do you want to have 2, say, because you want to have
up to 7.
I don't think it's our decision to make. And I don't think we should be landing on the answer. I think we should be asking the question.
Yeah, probably not quite ready for that. So we say, let's go with what we've got, but with the ability that once the relationships have settled on what the future might look like, we can go back and revisit the constitution and be specific about whatever we can.
We certainly have
might
two
want
spare slots at the moment on top of what we're recruiting, right? So
Well, that's right, they're going to have the ability to add more, but if the significance of engagement policy says that through those conversations that, well, ideally there will be, or it might state that there will be direct appointment to the board from collectively the Runaka, which would be a good way to do it. Then it's up to them. Then they have to work out how they're going to do
Wait
it.
a second, I'm just clarifying, so you're saying the board can decide that? I think we specifically said that any new directors,
we have to.
that is a decision of ours, yeah, so, and I'm not comfortable going down the route that the board then decides if they want a couple of extras, that should be our decision. And if those couple of extras, got to be specific things, that's fine, but I think that should be, I think we should retain that as our decision.
it is our call.
Yeah, but you might reflect that in the CCO might reflect that in the significance and engagement policy, which I think was Councillor's point, which has got to come to you all for approval anyway.
Can I just mention that I know that 7 is the number that gets thrown around a lot because there is 7 in Runaka. 2 is a very, very comfortable number for the 7 in Runaka because it means that regionally they are represented well. If ever talked about their sort of statutory authority rivers, and they just picked every second one just to make sure that they had it covered. We have 2 on the spatial plan. 2 is a very comfortable number. I'm not going to go and say, hey, I've got 2 spots for you until I get told by someone that I'm allowed to. But what I'm looking for is we are interested in what we want. I've always been clear that I don't have the authority to make any promises, but at least if I get that, if we get what Sam's saying out of Edward Mouth or someone else with sort of mandated authority, then we get a very clear direction.
Actually, we're talking about conversation, we don't know, it could be, yeah, we'd like to put something forward, or actually we'd just like to be involved in the selection or the skills matrix. Who knows? It could, that conversation could go anywhere, and we can't prejudge that until we've had a conversation and find out what would you like.
Having directors also,
what does good look like? You know,
having directors also limits their ability to challenge.
Because it's like, yeah, are they directors or are they advisors?
So you've got 2 different mechanism or examples across the Ngāti Taonga. So Selwyn, for instance, is a council. This is not water services. They have mana whenua members of council. They have Selwyn. Yeah. They have voting rights. And the Cargill have mana whenua members. They have speaking rights, but no voting rights. So within the same area, within the same takiwā, there's 2 different examples, and they both probably, at least they have their voices at the table. It's probably what they're looking at.
Councils are quite different to boards though, so the complication is that directors have to act in the best interests of the company, which is why they might choose advisors.
But that's what I was thinking. I was like, we really need to find out what they'd like, right?
The most important thing is we'd actually really like to have formal comment on the water services structure. I don't. Or they might just say, well, just do what you want.
If you remember you won't remember, but the key decisions document originally Mike had a number of options for you to discuss. So we can, we can always come back to that a little bit later. But what I'm hearing for now is there seems like there's an appetite to be involved in the selection of the next 4 directors and from iwi. Is that what Sam was saying?
There was an expectation when I said, well, one of the expectations about getting directors, absolute involvement in the selection process, not necessarily having seats at the table or seats on board, but there was a clear expectation that Manafena would be involved in the selection process. And I'm going, okay, well, we've just done one process, didn't even cross my radar. That's my bad. Should have thought about that, but we haven't asked the question.
So are you now, this is a direction now that perhaps John will have a conversation with Sam. Is that an actual thing they would like us to progress with as we go for the
Yeah,
final four.
I'll forward the email that I've had from Sam to various staff, and you can sort of follow up on that and see where
We also need that broader conversation about the wider thoughts on this, together with the other water things that we need to talk to them about. So we need to work out what the next steps are and having those next sessions with Renata.
I'm just thinking, if you send that email across to us, and we can look at some options and try and come back with some suggestions how it can be worked then.
And it could be we do some really good stuff at this stage early on, and that will pay dividends when we know we're in the borough court or whatever. Just
Okay. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Listen.
The only thing is I feel like there's a little bit of a conflict if they're part of the recruitment process for the board and then potentially have positions on the board as well. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's one or the other. Like, I think that having them part of the recruitment process for the board and either directors or advisors, whatever that might look like, is actually a bit of a conflict. Like, I don't think that we should be going down both roads personally.
No. I mean, I don't think it's talking about nominating seats. It could be something simple as if Sheffield actually just got in touch with them and said, "Is there anyone you'd like us to shoulder that? Is there anyone you want to put forward for a director?" I mean, there's different ways of
I think it's
engaging.
that's why it's really sophisticated in this space, like in terms of they have a range of people who play in the professional directorship space, full stop. So I think in that sense it's good. I think you have got a point there, Melissa, around sort of calibrate that somewhat. We do have a good track record though. Arn's role, we interviewed, we long listed, shortlisted, advertised together, did the works together. And so that is a muscle that we can re-exercise and give some guidance on. That worked very, very well.
For recruiting.
For recruiting us,
Yeah, it's different because it's wasn't a monopoly specific position. So there's a difference there, right?
It could have been.
The other part of the
You're not
is that
recruiting to a Manifesto specific position. You're thinking about including Manifesto in the recruitment process for everyone else.
Yeah.
They're not.
You're giving them.
Look, I think it's a lot of detail, and I just
Well,
want
hang on,
to.
what we're talking about here, sorry.
Oh, sorry, it's just, we were talking to, we've been interviewing and the comment was, don't go out with options, don't go out, just go and ask the question. We've spent all this time talking about where it might go, and we just need to go and ask the question, don't we? Really? Because we don't know.
Do we have a mechanism to go and ask that question to all the Renata? Yeah.
Jump in the car and pay for what I was looking for these. No, I mean, that's a cheeky answer, but yeah, I know the people that I would approach to, and it wouldn't be seven, it would be one or two with authority.
Can I just check this, because actually it feels like we are going back around the loop, and I'm really mindful that we need to have a constitution in place and a board by 30 June. So are you now saying you're going to go out to the 7 when John has started to develop this relationship with Sam?
I would suggest we pause. If John sends his information through, and then we'll have an offline conversation, so that we don't spin the wheels any further.
I'll go where it's on.
Right. Well, if there's nothing else, I think I have what I need, and the next session could be the draft.
The matter's still to resolve.
Yes.
I'm interested in that, because last time we talked about the things that if you don't put them in the constitution, that might not be able to be included in the statement of expectations. We sort of semi-requested, or I certainly said that I would like to see what things those might be, where if you didn't include them in the constitution, you might not be able to include them in the SOA. Did we go through the exercise to figure out what those might be?
No, and I think the advice from Mike was we can address that through the significance and engagement policy.
But that's not what I would have liked. So I'm sitting around the table trying to go on this thing, and I mean, look, I can probably go and ask AI what they are, but I just thought it would be great to know which things that we might need to include in the constitution. If we don't include them, we can't include them in the SOA. If it's 5 things or 10 things, 20 things, I don't know. I don't know what they are, but I think we need to know, because that's our options and going forward, and we have to understand our options. Otherwise, we're not making an informed decision.
What might be an example of something that
Well, I think one of the things is obviously the contract length. I suspect that's one of the things that if we don't include in the constitution, we might not be able to include it in the SOE. It's not an SOE type thing for a start, but there are other things where it talks, and the Act is very specific in the wording around, there are certain things around, and Mike will have that wording potentially in front of it. I forget what section it was. 27?
How did you know? I've got the Act printed in front of me.
27, and you have got it printed in front of you. Yeah, so it's clear about the wording of the. Could you read it, maybe?
It's section 228, so additional requirements. So this provision is designed to try and provide some further clarity around what an SOE is able to do. And it says quite clearly to start with, it must be consistent with all legislative obligations that apply to the company, the foundation documents and its responsibilities. But it has a little subsection 3 and 4, which say the statement of expectations must not include any requirements or expectations that relate to the company's performance or exercise of a duty, function or power, or that require the water organisation to perform or not to perform a specified act or to achieve a specified result in relation to a specified person or persons, unless the foundation documents provide otherwise. Now, it's all rather vague, to be honest, as to what that might mean.
Which is why I wanted some advice from them.
Yeah, I mean, one example could be if we're wanting for the company to be operating in an independent way in relation to the responsibilities that have transferred to it, that carries with it an implicit understanding that it is going to be responsible for making decisions around its activities. But through the foundation documents, there could be an ability to provide for the statement of expectations to, in fact, require it to do certain things, to provide the shareholder with that certainty. Now, this provision would tell you that the statement of expectations isn't allowed to include that explicit direction to do certain things unless the Constitution says that that's the case. But again, we come back to the vagaries around this. We don't know exactly what decisions might be so important or so explicitly directed that they need to be included in the Constitution at this current stage. And I think the other advice, and I acknowledge, Nikki, that you did ask for this advice on significant contracts in particular. We've prepared a brief email on this point to Maz, and except, yes, you could put something into your Constitution that restricts the company from being able to enter into contracts of certain lengths. And if it's in the Constitution, then the Companies Act says they have to comply with that direction. But there are, of course, these other options, one of which could be the significance and engagement policy, which could place a restriction around the ability to provide some clarification around what is a significant contract, which would require consultation first before it can be entered into, or council approval before it can be entered into. And then, of course, you do have the statement of expectation, which can supplement that and provide a very clear steer on the length of contract which would be able to be entered into.
Could I just ask a question, Mike? Could we have something in the Constitution, a clause that says that notwithstanding this Constitution, this document does not preclude the shareholder from raising any relative matter into the statement of expectation. So you sort of clearly carving out without knowing what the issue is, and then finding we can't raise it because it wasn't in the Constitution. If there's a catch-all in the Constitution which basically reflects that this is the Constitution, but it still does not preclude the shareholder from raising anything else.
You can probably see a slightly pained look on my face here, John. Do I need to turn my own camera? I'm taking this on board, but I need to look at that further, because I think that the way that provision is framed is it's designed to try and be quite explicit about what these requirements or expectations are. And if you were to leave it so broadly cast that the statement of expectations can do this, I'm just conscious that that could create some tension with your board, because they will want to have some certainty around their level of independence as well. I can come back to this though with you. I'm more than happy to look at it further. I'm just wanting to make that initial observation around the framing of the provision.
Any requirements would have to be subject to the Act. It'd have to be in line with the purpose. So it's not like, that we could sort of direct something. It's just how do we cover the fact there might be something that we don't.
Well, this is the thing. What I would like is a table that says these are the things that might come up. Things are the things you might like to retain control over. Here's the options of where you can retain control over them. Significance and engagement policy, blah, 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 and it needs to stand up because it needs to not be that, we get to the significance and engagement policy. It's like, it doesn't quite fit because, I just feel like the foundation document is the safeguard, it's the safe place to put some of these things, but I don't know exactly what they are. But I can go away and try and do this.
Anybody knows what they are. I think that's kind of what I'm saying.
I think the contract length is probably one thing, and not being able to enter into certain contracts or with certain organisations, or I don't know, but I think it would be nice to have some understanding before we.
I'm not sure that we can do that.
I wonder if the way to proceed is,
I'll give it a crack.
Last week we kind of said, you kind of said, if it's not in the Constitution, we'll just change the Constitution. If you get to that point.
It's too late. Which is, again, sorry, and I'm going to use the example of the airport where, shares were sold. After something's happened, you can go, oh, shit, we should have had that in there. We'll put it in there for next time for when they might sell shares again. We need to actually get on top of what things might occur. And we've got enough expertise. There are people that deal with contracts and stuff all the time that go into contracts and protect organisations based on what's in those contracts. There are people that
think it will be too late because you will have officers coming to you, helping you shape the statement of expectations. Part of their due diligence will be making sure that all the legal constructs line up. So they will go back to the Constitution and be speaking about any misalignment.
But again, we keep getting told that, we don't want to go back and keep changing the Constitution. We can't put that in the Constitution because we don't want to go back and change it because it's this long-lived document. And then on the other hand, we get told, we can just pop in and change the Constitution.
But this is the first Constitution and the first Statement of Expectations. When you're setting the first Statement of Expectations, the entity doesn't even exist. So they're not giving effect to anything yet. When you go through the Statement of Expectations, you can say, these are all the things we want to give them direction on. And at that point, if there's something on that list that you can't do because of this, then you can go back and change the Constitution because actually the entity's not even operating yet. That's part of our kind of startup.
Okay, no, that makes sense. Yep. Thank you, Penny.
I think that's what Naz was getting at.
The other thing I was thinking about the 15 years is that it may be like a design build project where the contractor might want to spread that over 50 years and it's more cost effective to do it over 50 years.
Design build over 50 years.
Design build operate. Design build operate, yeah.
So I think those are the sorts of things where we might want to retain control over sign off on something like that. And these were the things that everyone we interviewed was speaking the same language. They were like, you will want to retain control over large spends, large contracts, long contracts. They were sort of saying, 3 to 5 feels like a long term for a contract, but you might want incentivized, incentive rights of renewal. And so these are the things, and they're all speaking the same language. The point is to put something in there to guard against when something goes wrong.
Yeah, so you need to think about those things.
We need to think about all those
expectations.
But and so you're doing that work in the background to help us figure out all those detailed things that we might want in there.
Or do we need to do that? Bring a draft through, which will also include a number of comments that have been shared over many weeks that we've picked up, particular things you might be looking for. But you also have a significant and engagement policy. Where a number of these things will feature, and it is the entity's policy, but it has to be approved by council.
We will also.
I need to go, so apologies for that.
Oh yeah, good luck.
Yeah.
We'll also feed into that learnings from the airport in terms of the things that we know are important to include in that. And so there'll be a lot of different lenses to that, but there'll be things that you feel strongly about that officers don't. That you will need to put it on the table. That first discussion will be to gather that information from you as well.
Yeah.
That's why there's multiple statement of expectation discussions.
Awesome. Okay, I'll do some more work. Some proper work today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Positive, watch this.
What's that?
Well, why you raise it, you need a special positive.
Oh, that's good.
It's got a really good one already.
Yes, we should have that material a few days before that work.
Oh, because I don't.
Okay, I'm going to remind you. I'm going to look.
Yes, I think
Thanks so much,
we
Mike.
almost did it. They nearly sold more. They wanted, so that was, you know.
Yeah.
Right.